Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at an editorial from page number 6 of the Delhi edition. This editorial deals with the latest Nipah outbreak in Kerala and illustrates how we can draw lessons from our experience in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic in order to effectively manage and contain such infectious outbreaks. See, the Nipah virus infection is a viral infection caused by the Nipah virus. This is a type of a RNA virus in the genus Henipavirus, and the natural host of this virus is considered to be fruit bats. This is essentially a zoonotic disease that can jump from animals to humans, and it is known to spread amongst humans through contact, and it also jumps from fruit bats to other animals such as pigs, and in turn transmission can occur to human beings. So when humans come into contact with the fluids of an infected fruit bat, or when they consume the fruits eaten by infected bats and birds, or when they are working in close contact with infected animals such as pigs, then the zoonotic transmission will occur, and it can start spreading within the human population when other people come in contact with infected people. Once infected with a Nipah virus, symptoms will start appearing between 5 to 14 days after exposure, and the initial symptoms include fever, headache, drowsiness, etc. This could be followed by disorientation and drowsiness and mental confusion, and in the early stages, even respiratory issues are reported. But very quickly, the disease can aggravate and put the patients into a coma, and it can even result in the inflammation of the brain and encephalitis, and this becomes a potentially fatal complication of the Nipah disease. The Nipah virus infection happens to have a very high mortality rate, thus making it one of the most dangerous infectious outbreaks. As of now, there is no specific treatment for Nipah, and the infected patients are mainly managed through supportive care and symptomatic treatment, and several antiviral drugs are used to mainly manage the symptoms. But as of now, there is no specific treatment or no vaccine available for treating or preventing the Nipah virus infections. The first major outbreak of this disease was reported back in 1998 in Malaysia, and later similar outbreaks have been reported in Singapore, in Bangladesh, and as well as in India in the states of West Bengal and Kerala. Recently in 2018, Kerala witnessed one such outbreak, which was centered around Kozhikode and Malappuram, and around 17 deaths were reported before the outbreak was effectively curbed by the Kerala government thanks to its superior healthcare infrastructure, which effectively implemented containment and preventive measures. But now this disease with a high fatality rate is back in Kerala at a time when India is already suffering from the COVID-19 pandemic. See, tropical countries like India, they are not new to infectious outbreaks. There have been several viral and bacterial outbreaks that are often reported, and India's integrated disease surveillance program monitors many such infectious outbreaks. The popular ones include malaria, H1N1, dengue, chikungunya, and the others. But however, unless major outbreaks occur in urban areas, the government and the media do not pay adequate attention to other minor outbreaks that occur in rural areas. And for example, you might have even heard about mysterious fevers and mysterious diseases in states like UP and Bihar, which are often not diagnosed correctly due to poor awareness and poor response. And until 2019, whenever such infectious outbreaks were occurring, we have always witnessed a very poor reactive response of the government and the media, and also poor awareness amongst the public in general. But thankfully, the COVID-19 pandemic has led to a significant change in this regard. As the SARS coronavirus 2 took the world by surprise, it left behind a deep impact on the world, and hence our experience with the pandemic offers significant lessons to contain and even prevent such infectious outbreaks. Prior to the pandemic, the public in general, the media, and even the government wasn't paying enough adequate attention to infectious outbreaks. Many such outbreaks have the potential to turn into an epidemic or a potential pandemic, but despite that, contagious diseases never received adequate attention. But now, after the pandemic and the Nipah outbreak of 2018, we all have become more familiar with preventive and containment strategies such as contact tracing, widespread testing in order to identify the cases and timely isolate them and quarantine them in order to contain the spread of the infection. We have become more aware of the importance of personal hygiene and basic sanitary and safety measures such as the usage of sanitizers, PPE kits, masks, etc. The pandemic and its deadly impact has pushed the people, the government, and the media to be proactive in their response to infectious outbreaks. And these vital lessons offered by the pandemic should be used by the Kerala state government and by the government of India to quickly tackle the Nipah outbreak as well. During the previous outbreak in 2018, the Kerala government had done a phenomenal job at implementing these preventive and containment measures, and very quickly it had managed to curb the spread of the disease. But however, adequate caution has to be taken considering the high fatality rate of Nipah virus infections. And this is one of the infectious outbreaks which definitely has the potential to turn into a pandemic. So considering this, we need to draw significant lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic based on our experience of the last 1.5 to 2 years and focus on the three key strategies of containing a pandemic. This includes infection control through measures such as contact tracing, widespread testing, quarantine, basic safety and hygiene. The second step involves efficient treatment of the infected patients. And the third step involves the development of vaccines and timely administration of vaccines, which has to be the most definitive step of preventing or containing a pandemic. Experts have already stated that the currently available COVID-19 vaccines can be tweaked to deal with Nipah as well, and immediate efforts will have to be made by the government and as well as by the pharma industry to speed up the development of vaccines for the Nipah disease as well. See, prior to COVID-19, developing vaccines was always a very time-consuming process. It would often take years and even decades to develop effective vaccines against infectious diseases, because there would always be problems with funding, or adequate attention wouldn't be given to research and development by the pharma industry, and there would be several challenges in conducting clinical and human trials, and there were also several roadblocks with regard to regulatory approvals from the government. But now the COVID-19 pandemic has changed all of this, because currently with regard to vaccine development, every aspect of vaccine development has been fast-tracked, and today governments and companies are ready to pump funds immediately, take up immediate research and development, carry out swift trials, and obtain quick approvals through emergency use authorization, and bring out vaccines as soon as possible in order to contain these infectious diseases. So the same knowledge, the same lessons, and the same processes will have to be replicated for containing other infectious outbreaks as well. And if the government can prioritize vaccine development for Nipah as well, within a few months, India can have a vaccine which will help in containing such future outbreaks. There is also a potential candidate vaccine which is being developed specifically for Nipah, and this vaccine is already undergoing early human trials. So the development, testing, and deployment of this vaccine has to be fast-tracked, along with considering a tweak of the current COVID-19 vaccines to deal with Nipah. Then in the short term, the state government with the support of the center will have to focus on infection control through established preventive and containment strategies, and as well as focus on treatment in order to manage and bring down the high fatality rate of this disease. But in the long run, the only solution is to develop an effective vaccine, and such proactive swift responses are the only way through which we can deal with such future infectious outbreaks. Now let's take up another editorial from page number 6, which deals with the monopolizing tendency of the big tech firms and app store operators. See, big tech companies, that is internet-based companies and social media firms such as Facebook, WhatsApp, Apple, Google, Microsoft, and even the likes of Amazon and Netflix have been leveraging their tremendous market share to establish their own monopolies in their respective domains. In this regard, The functioning of App Store operators, such as Apple and Google, has come into question as they are seeking to monopolize the app-based economy. See, today the global economy has largely turned into an app-based economy because we all are availing various goods and services through apps or mobile applications, be it for ordering food or for booking a cab or for booking movie tickets or for shopping online. We all rely on mobile applications, and all these mobile apps, which are developed by third party app developers, are placed on the app stores. We have app stores such as the Play Store of Google or Apple Store of Apple, where we all download these third party applications to access digital commerce and to avail ourselves of these various economic services. So all the third party apps that are developed, they are stored on the app stores, which are run and maintained by these big tech companies, that is Google and Apple. And essentially, they have become the gatekeepers who are regulating access to the app based economy. So, this gives these companies tremendous powers as they not only get to monopolize the massive amounts of data that they are collecting, but they can also leverage their dominant position in the market and misuse it to create an unfair advantage for themselves, thereby placing the third party app developers at severe disadvantage. Because of their dominant position in the market, and since they function as gatekeepers to the app based economy, all the app developers are dependent on the app store operators. And even we as consumers have come to entirely rely upon these app store operators. It has been noticed that these app store operators, they have been forcing the other app developers to mandatorily make use of their in-store payment system. And if a third-party app developer tries to develop their own payment system, they are even removed from the app stores by citing their internal policies and terms and conditions. So such forceful and mandatory usage of in-store payment systems essentially qualifies to be seen as an anti-competitive antitrust policy, which unfairly affects the app developers and allows the big tech firms to establish a complete monopoly where they get to dominate the app-based economy. Such anti-competitive antitrust practices of the big tech firms affects not just the small app developers and the third parties, but it even has a significant impact on the consumer because such monopolization affects the choice that we have in the market. These companies which have a dominant position in the market, they can choose to determine what kind of access and choice we as consumers have in the market. This in turn stifles competition and even innovation. And once choice and competition reduces, automatically the cost will go up for the consumer. Because that is exactly what will happen in case of a monopoly. So the third party application developers and the small app developers and the consumers, they would be placed at a severe disadvantage and they would be placed at the mercy of these monopolies. So this is a grave concern that has emerged with regard to the functioning of big tech firms. And around the world, governments are seeking to take action against the big tech firms by bringing their policies and their services under strict regulation. Recently, South Korea became the first country to bring out one such regulatory policy, which has been termed as the anti-Google law. South Korea recently amended its Telecommunications Business Act in order to prevent app store operators like Google and Apple from forcing app developers to mandatorily use their in-store payment system. This law enacted by South Korea represents the global momentum that is gaining towards regulating the big tech monopolies. Even in Australia, recently a law was brought out which mandates internet platforms and social media firms like Facebook and the others to pay media outlets for publishing their content. Then in the European Union, a draft law is being worked out on similar lines to regulate the functioning of big tech firms. Big tech companies like Google, Apple, Facebook, and the others have even faced several antitrust, anti-competition investigations in the European jurisdiction. In the United States as well, a group of senators have proposed a bill to regulate the functioning of the big tech firms. Around the world, they are even facing several legal cases and legal challenges And in many jurisdictions, antitrust, anti-competition investigations have been opened against the big tech companies. Even in India, the Competition Commission of India is looking to open similar investigations against the likes of Apple and Google. So, in this context, the editorial says that the time is right for India as well to follow the global trend and bring out an effective law to regulate the big tech companies which are seeking to establish their monopolies and create a legal framework, especially to regulate the functioning of App Store operators. The editorial points out that the Indian government has recently extended support to the establishment of the Open Network for Digital Commerce, which is seeking to democratize e-commerce around the world. And recently, the Indian government has shown the willingness and intentions to further regulate internet and tech-based companies. So if we have to protect the truly open and democratic nature of the internet, then governments will have to actively prevent the emergence of such monopolies which end up stifling choice, competition, and raising costs which affects the consumer and as well as the whole industry. Hence, the editorial is calling upon India to make use of this momentum to bring in adequate regulatory policies and laws to prevent the formation of these monopolies in order to protect technological innovation and consumer choice in today's app-based economy. Now let's look at a column from page number 7 in which the writer, a former IPS officer and a retired IGP of the CRPF, makes a case for a dedicated tribunal for the Central Armed Police Forces. See, under the Ministry of Home Affairs, several paramilitary and security forces have been classified and categorized as CAPFs or the Central Armed Police Forces. This includes the likes of CRPF, BSF, the CISF, NSG, etc. Some of them are border guarding forces and some of them are involved in internal security duties. Within these CAPFs, there will be several legal cases pertaining to the officers and the Jawans, and one of the most common dispute seen within CAPFs is with regard to officers overstaying their leave. So for dealing with such matters of disciplinary action, the MHA has ordered the CRPF headquarters recently to include the provisions of Security Force Court or SFC as provided under the Acts and Rules of CAPFs for initiating any disciplinary action against the delinquent officers. The objective is to minimize the time involved in deciding upon these cases so that swift action is taken against delinquent officers and the matters are resolved in the shortest time possible. See, paramilitary forces such as the CRPF, they are established through parliamentary acts and there are a set of rules that govern their functioning. As per the CRPF rules, a clear-cut procedure has been laid down for a departmental inquiry against non-gazetted officers. As per the rules, any such cases involving disciplinary matters can be taken to the high courts and matters related to non-gazetted officers can be resolved quite quickly. But however, when matters related to gazetted officers comes up, there are very long delays seen in these cases as the inquiries will take much longer due to the involvement of several institutions including the UPSC, the Central Vigilance Commission, the Department of Personnel and Training, the Home Ministry and the others. The writer points out that in case officers are overstaying their leave and if an inquiry is instituted against these officers, then the officer in question must appear in front of the inquiring authority along with a presenting officer and a defense assistant. In such inquiries and hearings, even if one of them fails to appear, the hearing and the inquiry has to be postponed, thereby resulting in long delays in deciding upon these cases. Then there are several other procedural challenges and problems in inquiring and taking action against senior gazetted officers. So the writer suggests that the best solution for this would be to establish a dedicated tribunal for dealing with all such cases related to Central Armed Police Forces, similar to how the armed forces have been provided their own armed forces tribunals. Because currently our courts are overburdened with cases and there are several backlogs. Upon this, these procedural issues are creating even more delays in these cases. So if a separate tribunal is set up, it can function as a quasi-judicial body, and senior retired officers can be appointed along with retired High Court judges to oversee these inquiries and to fast-track these cases in order to provide for faster delivery of justice. According to the writer, a separate tribunal would also reduce the burden on the courts, and hence he makes a strong case for the establishment of a separate tribunal for the Central Armed Police Forces. Now let's take up an article from page number 1, which deals with the Northeast insurgent outfit known as ULFA and one of its factions, ULFA Independent. See, amongst the various Northeast insurgent groups that are there, ULFA happens to be one of the most notorious outfits, which was established in 1979 in Assam in the backdrop of the Assam agitation, which was going on against the large-scale influx of Bangladeshi refugees and migrants into India. ULFA stands for United Liberation Front of Assam, and it claims to represent the native Assamese. As the natives of Assam opposed the large-scale influx of refugees and illegal migrants from East Pakistan and later from Bangladesh, widespread protests had broken out in the 1970s in the form of the Assam agitation. In this backdrop, some of the radical elements in this student-led protest decided to establish an insurgent group known as ULFA, not just to fight against the entry of outsiders from Bangladesh, but also to fight against the government of India in order to liberate Assam from India and establish it as an independent country, and hence ULFA was essentially a separatist movement. Very quickly, ULFA gained strength and it built ties with other Northeast insurgent groups such as the NSCN and the other factions of NSCN. Reportedly, ULFA also received support and backing from the intelligence agencies of China and Pakistan, and through such external support, ULFA managed to set up a terror safe haven in Bangladesh, especially after Bangladesh came under military rule from the 1970s and 1980s. For several years, ULFA was a major security threat for India, and it was known for carrying out major terror attacks against India. But in Bangladesh, a major change happened in 2009 when the Awami League won the elections and Sheikh Hasina became the Prime Minister of the country. Sheikh Hasina, who has been a close friend of India, immediately cooperated with Indian security agencies to wipe out the terror sanctuaries that existed in Bangladesh. And as a result of this cooperation from Bangladesh, India managed to weaken and wipe out Northeast insurgent groups such as ULFA. By 2012, the terror camps of ULFA in Bangladesh were destroyed through joint operations of Indian agencies and Bangladeshi agencies, and the top leadership of ULFA, led by Arvind Rajkova, were arrested, and they were even handed over to India, which pushed ULFA to talk with India and negotiate with India for a peaceful settlement. So as the leaders of ULFA, led by Arvind Rajkova, agreed for negotiations with India, following the weakening of this outfit in Bangladesh, an anti-talks faction emerged under the leadership of Paresh Barua. He would go on to set up a new faction of ULFA known as ULFA I or ULFA Independent, and reportedly this new faction under the leadership of Paresh Barua sought shelter along the borders of China and Myanmar. Indian intelligence agencies have reasons to believe that the Chinese intelligence still backs ULFA Independent, and this new faction has even built contacts with several other new factions of the NSCN which are operating along Myanmar's border. Over the years, ULFA Independent has remained a security threat for India, but recently in a major breakthrough, ULFA Independent has announced a ceasefire with India for 3 months in order to lay the groundwork for talks with the Indian government. In this regard, the leader of ULFA Independent, Paresh Barua, has stated that the insurgent group will agree to talk to India only if a senior representative of India from the state of Assam is appointed for negotiations. ULFA Independent and Paresh Barua have made it clear that they will not accept any outsiders, and they have even suggested the Chief Minister of Assam himself as a mediator for facilitating these peace talks with the Indian government. Then coming to the last article, let's look at a major development from Afghanistan. After several weeks of uncertainty, the Taliban has announced the formation of an interim government. This government shall be headed by Mullah Muhammad Hassan Akhund, who would serve as the acting Prime Minister of Afghanistan, and he happens to be a veteran of the Taliban and also the head of the Shura Council of the Taliban. Earlier, Mullah Muhammad Hassan Akhund has served as the Deputy Foreign Minister when the Taliban had formed the government between 1996 and 2001, and he also happens to be a UN blacklisted terrorist under the Sanctions Committee. Then, the co-founder of Taliban, Abdul Ghani Baradar, would become the deputy leader, and he was a key political figure of the Taliban who carried out the talks with the US at Doha, as he headed the political office that the Taliban had opened in Qatar to hold talks with the US. Then the leader of the Haqqani network, which is a designated terrorist outfit reportedly close to Pakistan's ISI, Sirajuddin Haqqani, has been appointed as the Interior Minister of Afghanistan. Now, this would obviously cause a great deal of concern for India because Sirajuddin Haqqani and his terror outfit, the Haqqani network, have always operated as a proxy of the ISI and they have repeatedly targeted Indian interests in Afghanistan. The Haqqani network has even carried out several major terror attacks against the Indian embassy and consulates in Afghanistan. Then Mullah Yaqub, the son of the founder of Taliban, Mullah Omar, has been appointed as the defense minister of the country. And the supreme leader of the Taliban, Hibatullah Akhundzada, who is seen as a religious figurehead, has called upon the new interim government to uphold Sharia law in the country. And since this newly formed cabinet includes several designated terrorists such as Mullah Muhammad Hassan Akhund, Sirajuddin Haqqani, Mullah Yaqub and the others, countries like India might find it very difficult to recognize this government and to directly engage with this government. Now coming to the mains practice questions. The first question. Even as India battles the coronavirus pandemic, fears of a Nipah virus outbreak have surfaced again in Kerala. In this context, examine the preventive and containment measures that need to be taken by drawing lessons from the pandemic. The second question. A law to regulate App Store operators is key to check big tech's monopolizing nature. Discuss. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers on the answer writing portal, for which the link shall be shared in the description box below. So with this, let's conclude our discussion for today. Thanks for watching.